That particular Saturday afternoon had a distinct, unhurried quality. A day where time itself seemed to be taking a break. I was lounging on my couch, aimlessly cycling through the endless feed on my phone, when I saw a notification for a missed call from Noah. He'd sent a follow-up text asking if I was still planning to come by. His mom needed help with her taxes, a task I, with my accounting studies, had foolishly volunteered for weeks ago. It didn't feel like a monumental imposition. So, I gathered my laptop and a folder of reference sheets, texting him back that I was on my way. Noah's place wasn't a long haul, just a simple drive to the more manicured side of the Philadelphia suburbs. Nothing overly complex. I knew his mother, Claire, would be there, but she usually maintained a polite distance, often working in her home office or resting. My perception of her had never gone beyond the simple fact that she was remarkably elegant. For her age, she was likely in her mid-40s, but she carried herself with a grace that defied any number. To me, she had always been and only been Noah's mom. That was the beginning and end of it. No other thoughts attached. So, when I rang the bell, I fully expected Noah to greet me, but it was Claire who opened the door. She was dressed in a simple, form-fitting cashmere lounge set, her blonde hair pulled back loosely, still slightly damp as if from a recent shower. She seemed a little surprised to see me, but not at all flustered. For a moment, I wasn't sure where to direct my eyes. My gaze quickly found a spot on the wall just over her shoulder. The air felt charged with an unexpected awkwardness. "Hey, Liam," she said, her smile warm and genuine. Noah had to run out for a bit, a last-minute thing with his study group. Her voice was smooth with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. "What brings you by?" I found myself stumbling over my words for a heartbeat before I remembered my purpose, holding up my laptop bag like some sort of offering. "I'm here for the taxes. I guess I didn't realize you'd be in the middle of getting ready." She let out a soft, low chuckle and tucked a stray damp strand of hair behind her ear. "Oh, I'm not busy," she assured me, her tone casual. "Just finished a workout. Why don't you come in and get set up?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second, uncertain if I should wait for Noah, but I stepped inside anyway. She wasn't a stranger, of course, but something about this felt different. I had only ever seen her in the context of a composed, maternal figure. I never imagined feeling this peculiar pull of awareness toward her. We settled at the large dining room table, and she brought me a glass of iced tea. At first, our conversation was light, the kind of easy small talk you make with a friend's parent. But as we spread out her documents, W-2s, 1099s, receipts, I noticed her opening up in a way that was new. She spoke about her life, about the subtle shifts happening all around her and how, despite being constantly busy, she sometimes felt an overwhelming sense of solitude. For a long stretch of our time together, it didn't feel like I was talking with my best friend's mother. It was just the two of us sharing a surprisingly candid moment over a pile of financial paperwork, and the intensity with which she looked at me when I explained the deductions suggested she was interested in more than just the numbers. At some point, as she detailed a few freelance projects she'd worked on, she paused. "It's funny," she said. "You spend your life accumulating things, building a career, and then one day you have to distill it all down to these little boxes on a form. It makes you feel a bit impersonal." I stopped typing and looked at her. It was the first time I felt like I was truly speaking with her. Not the abstract idea of Noah's mom, but Claire. It was just her and me, sharing something honest and real. A switch flipped inside me. Then I began to see her in a completely new light. There was a depth to her, a whole person beyond the maternal role she occupied in my mind. She offered a soft, slightly mysterious smile. "Liam, you've become such a capable young man," she observed. "It's hard to reconcile with the image I have of you and Noah tearing through this house as kids." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just managed a small nod, my focus returning to the spreadsheet on my screen. A new kind of energy was crackling between us, something unsaid but undeniably there. I could feel it, a subtle spark, a quiet tension, but I couldn't decipher what it meant. What I did know was that I wasn't in any hurry to leave. She stood up to refill our glasses in the kitchen, and I followed, needing a break from the numbers myself. As she moved past me, I caught the delicate fragrance of her perfume, a clean, fresh scent mixed with something warm and floral. For that brief instant, the label of Noah's mom completely dissolved. She was just a woman, an individual with her own story, her own desires. "Thank you for doing this," she said, turning back to face me in the kitchen doorway. "I really needed to untangle all of this today." I gave her a small smile, feeling a pleasant warmth spread through my chest. "Anytime," I replied, and as I eventually packed up to leave, I couldn't escape the powerful sensation that something fundamental had changed between us. An unspoken connection had been formed, and I had no idea where it might possibly lead. The next time I saw Claire, it was entirely by chance. I was at a local bookstore cafe trying to get some studying done when I saw her walking. She was holding a novel and scanning the room for a place to sit, a slight contemplative frown on her face. For some reason, that simple expression captivated me. How had I never noticed the natural, unadorned beauty she possessed? It wasn't just about her physical appearance. It was in the deliberate way she moved, the quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from her. She seemed to possess a knowledge about the world that the rest of us were still trying to figure out. I hadn't expected to see her, and frankly, I was unsure how to act. We hadn't spoken since that strange afternoon with the tax forms and unexpected vulnerability, but something about that day had stuck with me. Something about her smile and the directness of her gaze had lingered in my thoughts. I had tried to write it off as a one-time unusual interaction, but that feeling returned the moment she looked up and her eyes met mine. "Liam," she said, her voice a low murmur, but her smile was calm and inviting. It was the kind of voice that had an immediate disarming effect. I smiled back, doing my best to project an air of casualness. "Hello, Claire. I didn't expect to run into you here." She gestured to the book in her hand. "Just needed a change of scenery to get through this," she replied. "Do you mind if I join you?" It was a simple question, but it led to a long, meandering conversation. We talked about books, about the changing seasons, about all sorts of trivial things. But simmering just beneath the surface of our words was that same hum of something deeper. There was a subtle but distinct tension in the air, brief, held glances, quiet smiles, and then out of nowhere, she asked, "Are you free for dinner sometime this week?" She said it so nonchalantly as if it were an afterthought, but I could tell she was gauging my reaction. I wasn't sure how to respond. My first instinct was to politely decline. After all, besides Noah and her taxes, what common ground did we really have? But the way she asked made it incredibly difficult to say no. Before I could overthink it, I heard myself agreeing. "Yeah, sure. I'd like that." And that was that. I had no concept of what I was stepping into, but a few nights later, as I walked up the stone path to her front door, a nervous energy buzzed in my chest. I felt a flutter of anticipation that I couldn't quite explain, as if I were about to cross a threshold into unknown territory. When I arrived, the house felt as warm and inviting as I remembered. The aroma of something savory and delicious drifted from the kitchen, filling the space with a warmth that felt almost overwhelmingly welcoming. Claire was already there, humming softly to herself as she stirred a pot on the stove. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her, and that's when it hit me. The woman before me didn't feel like the Claire I had known for years. She looked the same, but there was an openness about her, a genuineness that felt new and profound. "Come on in. Make yourself comfortable," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Dinner's almost ready." I took a seat at the kitchen island, trying to appear more relaxed than I felt. She moved about the kitchen with such effortless grace, as if she was in her natural element. Meanwhile, I sat there trying to process the strange swirl of emotions inside me. It wasn't just her appearance or how at ease she seemed. It was the way she made me feel, as if I was more than just her son's friend, as if I was someone she genuinely wanted to know. We ate, and the conversation flowed easily. There were no stilted silences or forced pleasantries. We talked about life, about dreams deferred, and about how things rarely unfold the way you plan. She spoke about her younger days before marriage and motherhood and how she missed the thrill of spontaneity, the feeling of being genuinely excited about the future. She admitted that with Noah getting older and more independent, her life had settled into a predictable rhythm. There was a raw edge to her voice when she said it. It felt like a confession she had been holding back for years, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I just listened. I didn't offer any grand advice or deep philosophical insights. I simply nodded and created a space for her to speak. And as I sat there listening, I noticed things. The way her eyes would light up when she spoke about something she was passionate about. The way her laughter sounded completely uninhibited. She wasn't just Noah's mother anymore. She was a woman with her own thoughts, her own history, her own unfulfilled needs. "Thank you for dinner," I said as we finished, and I began helping her clear the plates. She smiled at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw something deeper in her gaze, something vulnerable and searching. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "It's been a long time since I've had a real conversation with someone." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just gave a small nod, but I knew we were both thinking the same thing. A shift had occurred between us, something we didn't need to name aloud. When I was about to leave, she gave me a hug. It was simple, warm, and comforting. But her hand lingered on my back for a moment too long, and that small gesture stayed with me. "Take care, Liam," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. My head was spinning as I walked back to my car. The evening had felt so normal on the surface, yet it had unlocked something inside me. I couldn't put my finger on it. She hadn't done anything overtly suggestive, but the way she looked at me, the way she listened, it made me feel a genuine and unique connection between us. I had been to Noah's house hundreds of times, but this visit was different, and I hated how much I found myself thinking about it in the days that followed. I tried to push it out of my mind to pretend it was nothing. A few days later, Noah called and asked if I wanted to grab a drink. I figured getting out might help clear my head. But as soon as I walked into the dimly lit pub, I saw Claire sitting at a high-top table with a couple of her friends. She saw me, and a slow smile spread across her face as she waved me over. Without a second thought, I waved back. Her smile was relaxed, but it held a warmth that hadn't been there before. Something unspoken passed between us that made my stomach do a slow flip. "Liam," she said as I approached, "I didn't think I'd see you out tonight." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just meeting up with Noah. I didn't realize you'd be here." She let out a light laugh. "Yes, trying to reconnect with some old friends. It's been too long since I had a night out." Her gaze held mine for a second longer than was necessary. And just like that, the tension was back. That subtle undercurrent that seemed to hum between us, always there, just below the surface. I should have made my excuses, said my hellos, and gone to find Noah. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself pulling up a stool beside her. We talked, we laughed, and we pretended there was nothing unusual about the situation. Eventually, Noah arrived and joined our group. The three of us sat there talking about his classes, old memories, and the silly things we used to do as kids. But even with the lively chatter all around us, my mind kept drifting. And every time Claire glanced in my direction, I felt it. That shift, that unspoken awareness that her laughter or her gaze could provoke a reaction in me that I didn't fully understand. We both felt like we were guarding a secret that neither of us was ready to acknowledge. At one point, Noah got up to get another round of drinks, leaving just the two of us at the table. I hadn't planned on saying anything personal, but the words just came out. "So, Claire, how have you really been?" She paused. Her smile softened, and for a moment, I saw something raw and unguarded in her eyes. "I'm okay," she said quietly. "Things have just felt a little lonely lately." Her honesty caught me off guard again. It was as if she had peeled back another layer, revealing a person I hadn't expected to find. Someone who was so much more than just Noah's mom. "Yeah," I replied, nodding slowly. "I get that. It's not always easy." She gave a quiet nod in return, and we sat in silence for a few moments. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was comfortable, almost serene. I wanted to say something more, something to comfort her, to ease whatever burden she was carrying, but the words wouldn't come. So, I just looked at her, wondering if she meant it plainly, or if she was hinting at something more profound. Noah returned with our drinks, and the moment was broken. But something inside me had shifted again. That night, my perception of Claire was irrevocably altered. She no longer felt like just my friend's parent. There was a different kind of light around her now, a magnetic and slightly dangerous one. Later, when we all decided to head home, I walked with Noah to his car, but my thoughts were stuck on that brief, quiet conversation with her. What did she really mean by lonely? Was she simply making an observation, or was she gently asking for something more? As soon as I got home, I collapsed onto my couch and replayed the entire night in my mind. That dinner, her confession, the look in her eyes at the pub. It was then that I realized this wasn't just a series of random encounters. There was something else developing between us, something unspoken and powerful. And whether I wanted to admit it or not, I was being drawn into it. The most frightening part, I wasn't sure I wanted to resist anymore. The next few days felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation at the pub and the way Claire had opened up to me. Her quiet admission of loneliness, the way her gaze had lingered on mine as if searching for something, that all hung in the air between us. I couldn't shake the feeling no matter how much I tried to rationalize it away. I kept telling myself it meant nothing, that it was just a fleeting moment of connection. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Noah and I had always been inseparable. He was my best friend. But lately, even when we were hanging out, I found my mind wandering back to her, back to Claire. I hated that part of myself. I hated the thoughts that refused to be silenced. Her smile, the way she carried herself with that quiet grace. She felt different to me now, transformed. That Saturday, I decided I needed to clear my head. I called Noah and suggested we go to the local court and shoot some hoops, just like old times. Maybe if I physically exhausted myself, I could quiet my racing mind. When I got to the court, Noah was already there practicing his jump shot. He looked up and grinned when he saw me. "About time. You're late," he said, tossing the ball to me. I forced a smile, mumbling something about getting held up. We played hard for the next hour, joking, talking trash, and trying to one-up each other. But my head wasn't in the game. I was somewhere else entirely, a place that was warm, soft, and deeply confusing. After a while, we took a break, sitting on the edge of the court. Out of the blue, Noah asked, "Do you think my mom's doing okay?" He wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at me, his expression serious. The question caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "She's just been distant lately," he said, staring down at the pavement. "Not herself. I don't know if she's stressed or what, but something feels off. I think she's going through something." That hit me harder than I expected. I had always seen Claire as a pillar of composure, a steady presence who was never rattled or unsure. But maybe I was wrong. "I don't know," I said, keeping my tone non-committal. "Have you talked to her about it?" He shook his head. "Not really. Every time I try, she just brushes it off. I don't want to push, but I can tell she's not telling me everything." I wasn't sure what to say. A part of me wanted to be honest, to tell him about the connection I had felt, the subtle changes I had seen in her and in myself. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Maybe she just needs some space, I offered, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he muttered. "Maybe." But I could hear the doubt in his voice. He wasn't convinced. We finished our game and headed back to his place. The whole drive, my stomach was in knots, as if I were walking towards something I couldn't prevent. We walked through the front door, and there she was. Claire was sitting on the sofa, flipping through a magazine. She looked up when we came in, her face ranged in a pleasant smile, as if everything was perfectly normal. "Hello, boys," she said brightly, but I could see it, the weariness in her eyes, the slight stiffness in her posture. I realized she was playing a part. "Hey, Mom," Noah said, dropping onto the couch beside her. "You doing all right?" Claire paused for a beat too long before nodding. "Of course, sweetie. Just been one of those long weeks." I could tell she was deflecting, treating it as nothing. I didn't press her on it, mostly because I had no idea how. My own heart was pounding louder than I wanted to admit. "So, I retreated to the kitchen, telling them I was getting a glass of water. I needed a moment to breathe to escape the heavy atmosphere in the other room. But as I reached for a glass, I heard footsteps behind me. Claire was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. "Liam," she said softly, her voice low but direct. "Can we talk for a minute?" I turned around, startled. Yeah, sure. What's up?" She stepped into the kitchen, closing the door gently behind her. The space between us shrank, and I felt my chest tighten as she moved closer. "I just wanted to thank you for the other night," she began, her gaze not quite meeting mine. "It meant a lot to me." I swallowed hard, her words landing with more weight than I anticipated. "Of course," I managed to say. "You know I'm here if you ever need to talk." She nodded slowly, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick and heavy, buzzing with everything we weren't saying. Then, almost as if to change the subject, she said, "Noah's a great kid. He's had his share of struggles, but he has such a good heart." I nodded again, unsure where this was going, but her eyes stayed on me for an extra beat. That same spark I'd felt before was back, humming between us like a high-tension wire. "Yeah," I said quietly, "he really does." She smiled, but there was something else in that smile, something I couldn't quite decipher. I wondered if she was thinking the same thing I was, and for a split second I considered just asking her. I almost asked what was happening here between us, but I didn't. I just stood there caught in the charged silence with her, wondering what our next move was. Finally, she broke the moment with a quiet, "Thank you again, Liam." "Anytime," I replied, but a part of me knew I wasn't saying it in the same way anymore. A week went by after that tense conversation in the kitchen. Nothing spectacular or dramatic had happened, but it stayed with me. Every time I saw Claire after that, the air felt different, electrified. I couldn't tell if she felt it, too, or if I was just projecting my own feelings onto our interactions. Either way, the dynamic between us had fundamentally shifted, and I couldn't shake it. Noah and I continued to hang out as we always had. He laughed and joked, doing his best to keep things light, but it didn't help. Every time Claire walked into the room, my eyes would follow her. I noticed the small things like the way she tilted her head when she was listening intently and how her eyes would meet mine for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. I felt it. Then Saturday arrived. Noah had made plans with some of his college friends, which meant I was over at their house when he left. It wasn't what I planned, but I didn't mind. In truth, I needed the quiet. I needed space to try and make sense of the tangled mess of thoughts and feelings in my head and in my gut. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when I heard her voice call my name from the hallway. "Liam." I looked up surprised to see her standing there, her expression unreadable. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was already starting to race. She walked into the living room, paused for a moment, and then asked, "Can we talk?" That simple question made my stomach clench. "Yeah, of course," I said, setting my phone aside. She came over and sat on the couch next to me. We weren't touching, but the space between us felt infinitesimally small. The air felt heavier. The room felt smaller. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversations lately," she started, her voice soft and careful, "and I think I owe you an apology." I looked at her, completely thrown. This was not where I expected this conversation to go. "I know I've been a bit forward," she explained, admitted she'd been dealing with some personal things and hadn't meant to put any of that on me. I blinked, trying to read her face. "I mean, it's fine," I finally managed. "You don't have to apologize." A warm smile touched her lips at that, but something in her eyes told me she wasn't entirely convinced. There was more she wasn't saying. "I appreciate that," she replied, "but I feel like I might have crossed a line with you." My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment I had been both dreading, and if I was being completely honest with myself, quietly hoping for. I had no idea where it would lead, but I couldn't stop myself from hearing her out. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice softening, becoming more cautious. Claire took a deep breath and looked down at her hands, which were nervously twisting the hem of her sweater. "I think you know," she said gently. There's been something between us, and I can't keep pretending it doesn't exist. I froze. Her words hit me squarely in the chest with more force than I had anticipated. Of course, I had felt it, but hearing her say it out loud made it real, tangible, and terrifyingly complicated. I'm not trying to make things awkward, Liam, she continued, her voice just above a whisper. I'm just not sure how to handle this, but I can't keep acting like nothing is happening. I looked at her, my mind racing in a dozen different directions. Every rational part of me was screaming that this was wrong, that I should not be in this situation. And yet, there I was. I don't want it to be weird either, I said, trying to keep my voice steady to keep the entire situation from spiraling out of control. But I really don't know what you want me to say. She met my gaze then, her eyes direct and unwavering. We sat in silence for a long moment. The quiet was dense, laden with everything we couldn't yet say aloud. Then she reached out. Her hand brushed against mine, a touch so light it was barely there. But it sent an electric jolt through me. My breath hitched in my throat, and for a few seconds, I couldn't move. This isn't just me being lonely, Liam, she whispered, her eyes locked on mine. I don't know what this is, but I can't ignore it anymore. And I don't want to. A tidal wave of emotions washed over me all at once. Guilt, curiosity, desire, and fear. I was acutely aware of the risks. I knew the potential consequences if anyone found out about this. But the connection we shared felt too powerful to deny, and a significant part of me didn't want it to stop. Are you sure? I asked, my voice barely a tremor. I mean, about whatever this is. She nodded, her fingers curling around mine, her grip firm and certain. I'm sure. And with that, the invisible line we had been so carefully dancing around was erased. We didn't say anything else. There was nothing more to say, but the atmosphere had changed. We both felt the shift, the immense weight of what we had just acknowledged. Everything was different after that. A year has passed since that afternoon. An entire year of keeping our secret. A year spent balancing the routines of everyday life with the quiet, stolen time we carved out for ourselves. In some ways, it feels like we've lived a whole lifetime in those precious hidden moments. We didn't talk much about the us of it all. What had started that afternoon over a pile of tax forms had not faded. It had simply woven itself into the fabric of our lives. It felt surprisingly natural, but it was also fragile, something we guarded fiercely. We had agreed on one thing from the very beginning. Our own happiness mattered, and that happiness was built on a foundation of trust. A unique kind of trust that allowed us to be completely open with each other while keeping that world entirely hidden from everyone else. We constructed our own private space, our own small universe where the normal rules didn't apply. But the guilt never fully disappeared. Every time I saw Noah, a small sharp pang would hit the back of my mind. It wasn't because I thought he deserved to know, but because carrying a secret of this magnitude always leaves a mark. Still, I never once second-guessed the choice we made. We both made it, and no matter how complicated or precarious things became, it always felt right. Claire and I saw each other whenever we could, which wasn't often. We never pushed the boundaries. We kept everything discreet, quiet, and out of sight. The hardest part was the performance. Noah would be over laughing and talking completely oblivious. We would keep a careful distance, our hands to ourselves, acting as if we were nothing more than a mother and her son's good friend. But those small moments, the quick, meaningful glance across the room, the subtle smile that was only for me, the fleeting brush of our hands when no one was looking, they became our language. Those were the things that sustained us. When we were alone in her quiet house, we would sometimes talk about what might happen if the truth ever came out. We never had a concrete plan, just vague possibilities and half-formed ideas. We didn't dwell on it for long, though. We chose to live in the present, in the quiet, in-between spaces where we didn't have to explain ourselves to anyone, where we could simply be. It was a calm Saturday evening, almost exactly a year after our relationship had begun. I was back at Claire's house, sitting on the couch, the very same spot where it had all started. The house was peaceful. Noah was out with his friends, so we had the place to ourselves again. Everything felt normal now, a comfortable rhythm that had once felt so foreign. We had learned how to exist in this way, quietly, carefully, and deeply connected. We no longer needed to constantly talk about our feelings. The relationship had settled into something steady, something real. It was and always would be unconventional, but it had become something I couldn't imagine giving up. Claire sat next to me looking as beautiful as she always did. But there was a new softness about her now, an ease in her posture and a serenity in her expression. It had taken time, but we had learned how to carry the weight of what we shared. We had grown into our secret. I had found a strange peace in it. I had learned how to make it feel like home. "Do you ever think about how we ended up here?" she asked softly, her warm, low voice breaking the comfortable silence. I smiled and leaned back, sinking deeper into the cushions. "All the time," I admitted. "Honestly, I still can't quite believe we've made it this long." I looked over at her, my initial disbelief having morphed into something that felt a lot like gratitude. It certainly didn't feel like a year had passed. She let out a quiet laugh and rested her head on my shoulder. "It doesn't, does it?" she murmured. "But at the same time, it feels like this was always where we were headed, as if this was inevitable." I nodded slowly, my hand finding hers. "Yeah, it's weird," I said. "But it's the good kind of weird. I never expected my life to look like this. But now that I'm here, I wouldn't change a thing." She tilted her head up, meeting my gaze with that same look that always seemed to make the world stand still. "Me neither," she replied gently. "Given everything, I think we've done remarkably well. I'm glad we kept it to ourselves." There was a firmness in her voice, a certainty. "It's ours. It's just for us." And she was right. That was the most important part of it all. It wasn't about anyone else. This was something we had built together, quietly and painstakingly. "I'm happy," I said softly, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We're happy. That's what matters." We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. We just sat there side by side, enveloped in a silence that felt full, not empty. The only sound was a quiet ticking of the clock on the wall, marking the passage of time. A year had gone by, a full year of hiding in plain sight. We had somehow made it work. We had kept the secret. We had protected what we had. And through it all, we had held on to the one thing that mattered most: each other. As the evening wore on, and the sky outside deepened into a dark velvet, one thought became perfectly clear in my mind. This was exactly how I wanted things to stay. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and strange and undeniably complicated. But it was ours.